Hi, hello. Good afternoon, I think it's already. My name is Carolina Calzada Oliveira, and I am here today with Justine Fox, my business partner from Calzada Fox, and also with a very special guest, Judith Van Baal, who works for Clariant, and three of us are color forecasters. We know each other for quite a while. We have been working together in different areas, collaborate together, and today we are going to talk about how to use color trends. The way it's going to work, we're going to talk to each other about how we work in colors and how we put together a color trend. And at the end of the talk, we're going to talk about colors for 2020, and we're going to give you as well a little sneak preview about our thoughts for 20 and 21. Because we are already working on this season, I thought it will be nice for you to see as well what we are thinking and sharing your thoughts with us. And when we're looking about trends, I don't know if you all have been working with trends on the past, or you use trends for your work, or perhaps you are retailers and you follow them. But we thought in looking to a little bit the process. The first thing that we do is research. And the majority of you perhaps have come across of different books. And perhaps you ask yourself, what make a trend successful? And I think this will be my first questions for Justine and Judith to you today. What do you think is the process that will make a trend successful and use it more and be the trend that you will think that for them as well will be important to take into consideration?
You want me to go first? Okay. So I think when trends become successful is when you see them obviously in more than one segment. So if you start very often a trend starts signaling in one market and then it actually goes to a second and a third market. So there's actually this cross-segmentation. I think especially when I do my trend forecasting and I see recognition in the eyes of the audience, so my consumer, my customers as well, when they feel familiarized with the story, and especially after, I think, when they see that actually how it can apply to their product design. And I think at that point, something can be successful. So multiple markets, multiple industries, giving those first signals that this trend is upcoming. And then, interesting enough, obviously, in my market at least, everything needs to be global. So it can't only be British. So I work in Italy, can't only be Italian or European. It has to be global, working with OEMs.
Thank you. For you, Justine, when you have been working as now part of Calzada Fox, but you also have been doing consultancy on your own. When it comes to a trend, because you are following it from other trend forecasters, so you create your own trend, what do you think is the basics to make it more successful?
And I mean, for me, when I feel that a trend has been successful, when you see the businesses as well, and you see how the businesses have embraced certain aspects and how they've actually understood a trend, and you can see that the business has made better decisions about the products that they're designing, and they've had more engagement with the customers, they've had more engagement with the media, and so for them it kind of really raises their profile and sets them ahead a little bit of their competitors.
Yes, I think when it comes to trends, and we look into success, the first thing that we need to know what we call trend, what is a trend, and what is insights, what is drivers. We have a lot of we have been working on trends for the past 14 years, the majority of us, 10 years. And I know sometimes we look into trends and we think it's a direction. And many times, and designers tell us, I don't follow trends, I don't need to know this information. But depending how you use it, trends can help you to understand your consumer, which is why we call it insights. When you look into consumer behavior, trends can help you to understand what is going to be the future situation for the consumers in 10 years. And that's when we look into something like a mega trends, population growth, things that will affect us over 10 years, like different cases that now we are looking into is the rise of the middle class in Asia, how the population will grow over 2050 and we will be 9 millions, but also how we are not getting any older, more older and with giant. Now the media of age to die, I think, is 80 years old, yes? So it's depending what you're looking and what is your area of expertise, you can focus in different aspects of the trends. For us, when we talk about color trends, material trends, lifestyle trends, we are looking to trends that we call it micro trends, and they affect the consumer between 3 to 5 years. What we are looking is a direction and aesthetics, and sometimes you don't need to take all of them into consideration for your own business. You can look at them and see what it makes you feel more inspired, and take them only just to expand your views on colors, to understand the people that you are catering for, what it will be their scenario. Also, when we do research, we're looking very much to micro trends, because it's kind of like our present future. 5-10 years is something that if you are into color trend prediction, is much more intangible to predict, but definitely it's things there that will affect us. As social media, it have been make a change in our world, and if you're looking back on time, it was not that longer when we was not lead our marketing campaigns, our lives through something like a social media. When it comes to drivers, it's the cause of a trend, and as a trend forecasters, perhaps is what we look in the most. For you, what do you think is the driver more important for 2020? What do you think is really the path that will affect any single trend that you put out there?
One of the things for us that we've been looking at, obviously, is sustainability. And what sustainability actually means. It's one of those words that's like super overused nowadays. And so, for example, if people they mix it up with kind of welfare, if you think about things like the vegan leathers. So yes, the vegan leather will not impact the animal community, but it has a like high plastic content to it, and so is it environmentally sound? So is it truly sustainable? If you then look at like a natural leather, as it's a waste product from our meat-eating habits, if we don't utilise it, then are we actually causing more damage to the environment by not utilising it? So that's one of like the big questions that we're asking ourselves is, you know, what that really means in terms of how we look at the wider context of product and design.
For you, Judith?
So I do mainly societal trends. So I look a lot into socio-economical drivers. I look a lot into political systems. So anything that's happening, Brexit, the elections, the upcoming elections in the United States, what's been happening in Europe generally, but even just very recently, the trade war with China and then obviously the United States, how that influences behavior. Although we may think it doesn't directly influence behavior, it does create a feeling that we all have, obviously, because of social media. It's something that you can't really ignore. So what we're trying to interpret is how people are feeling, how that actually influences consumer behavior and also purchasing behavior, and how that then, of course, when you go to micro trends and color trends, what type of trends and colors you want to have around your home, because that's probably one of the only places you actually still feel like cocooning and where you're safe. So tactility derives actually from, although it seems very far away, from socio-economical influences.
Yes, I think when it comes to trends, always is a cycle when you're looking for a trend and you try to escape from reality. But I think for 2020 as well, we're a bit tired to escape. And I think I was listening another day for fashion trends. 2020 is the new 1920s, which was a time of changes, was the time of Art Deco. And as well it means that perhaps it's the time that people have to start to reacting and doing more things about the different drivers that perhaps make us change. And it comes new drivers as a new vision of spirituality, a new vision to understand that it's not only us in the world and how we relate it with other humans, which I think is also a very beautiful trend to look at. If you get sometimes tired, then everything is negative around you, I think.
But you find quite often, I'm sure you find it as well, Judith, is that the societal trends that are kind of influencing us all the time, the trends that come out of that, they kind of do two things really, don't they? They kind of reflect, like it's almost like a mirror, and then it's like an antidote to it, isn't it? It's like, you know, there's too much, I need a little bit of glam.
I think duality is one of the things that's been going on for a long time. So duality, so you've got as well still the detoxing, so the off the grid, putting off your phones, and then there is this increase of technology as well. So it's this duality that's happening. It's the same as going national and actually opening borders and closing up borders is something that obviously politically has been happening. But I do think 2020 is a tipping point. And I think you can see that with all these generations, how they're behaving and how they're really protesting and fighting for change. And I think that's 2020. And we'll have the influences of that behavior in 2021.
Yes, that's a very good thought as well. I really like that idea. When you work with trends, one of the first things that you need to take in consideration who is your consumer. Trend forecasting, you're using colors in order not to represent your personal taste, if not to understand what is going to be more important for a particular group. And the first thing that you have to have clear is where your consumers sit up and in which way they are adopting the trend. If they are innovators, early adopters, depending on the group that you can place them there, you will see if they need to understand the market more advanced or less advanced. And if you have to look to just the very tomorrow, which is 2020, and is in the year that we are now sitting up, or if you want to look to further trends. When it comes to trends, we talked before what a trend makes successful, but what do you understand for a trend to be relevant? Are trends relevant, still relevant? This is a very big topic. Are trends dead? Are we moving into a wall that we start to understand predictions in other way, or we cannot catch up with predictions because things are moving too fast?
I think that the trend industry is changing, and it has been changing very slowly over the kind of 15 years that I've worked in it. I think when I started, there were these trend forecasters who would stand there and they would almost dictate, I see a vision, I see all these fabulous colours and you must buy them. I think trends, their relevance has changed. So whereas before they were very much just kind of dictating this is what you need to do and you had that for a season, I think now that you see the more is giving you insights and influence and helping you to identify areas where you can make better choices, as I said earlier on, where you are not making products that people don't want to buy. So it allows you to refine down what's key to your business, and understanding who you are as a business is really important in understanding what aspect of a trend to adopt and how to adapt it to really speak directly to your consumer. It's not rocket science, though. I mean, it's something that we've all learned over the years. So it's something that is easily learned, how to identify and how to tailor this information to your business.
Well, I have to agree with Justine on that one. I think what's been happening a lot is that there's a lot of information out there. The access to information is very easy, but I think there's simply too much information, especially when it comes to trends, forecasting, color forecasting. It's also the new cool, so a lot of people are doing it. So I think that it's diluting the quality at times, which is something that concerns me personally. I do think that understanding consumer is one of the most important things. And I think if you're a designer, not necessarily do you have to go to trend forecasting presentations to understand what's happening. If you've got your tentacles out and you know how your consumers are feeling and how they're behaving, this allows you to design more intelligently. And I think coming to that, neuroaesthetics, so not neuromarketing, because that's been around since the 90s, but I think neuroaesthetics is going to help us do that. Space of Well-being, of course, by Google in Milan Design Week last year was a great example of understanding how you feel in a space. And this is key to designers to understand how people feel when looking at their art or their design, to be able to then take that information and design more intelligently. So I think definitely trends are here to stay. And I do agree with the whole misconception about trend forecasting that we're dictating. There's no dictation in trend forecasting. We look at signs and we put them together, we see the red line, and we put that together in a story, so it's like ready to give out to consumers. There's absolutely no dictation. I agree on that.
The story is almost like a shorthand, isn't it, for kind of bringing all these threads together, and it kind of just delivers that aspect in an easily understood way, but it's also always open to interpretation dependent on what your business is.
Yes, definitely. I think when it comes to trends, I try to think this from outsider point of view. Working on trends, we really know which ones they work better or not, because it's a very small world and we all know each other. But I think perhaps for you, if you want to find something that is truly relevant, you need to understand how this company or this person do the process behind, or if it's something that you're looking to do yourself in the future, how a process can be standardized the ways that you look into the trends and how the trends are created, I think. So sometimes we put together like a very easy understand 5 steps about how the trends can be done. And we're talking about, first of all, the research, then looking for images and materials, validation, create your color palettes, and build the story and the name. For you, which part of the process is more important and you think is the one you have to pay more attention when it comes to create a trend?
I mean, for us, like the research aspect is like huge, and it takes on very many different forms. And as Carolina showed you, that kind of trend curve. So once you understand what part of that curve that you're kind of that you're designing for, that you're forecasting for, will help you identify where your research lies. So, for example, like certain aspects will hit at different times. One of the really important things for us is not just like trend forecasting for next year, but understanding what kinds of technologies are going to be impacting the way that we do business, the way that our products are going to be coloured. And so one of the things, for example, at the moment that we're like very interested in and we're doing a lot more research into is what are going to be the impact on new technologies. Like again, recently we've been looking at the leather aspect and how new coatings can make your leather more water resistant, so you could actually end up using it more on product rather than, so it opens up your usages for it, how it can be kind of take on more thermo qualities by having quilting injected into it. Bacterial dyeing is a hugely fascinating area, with the dyeing industry being one of the top 10 polluters in the country, and so that's something that we're absolutely passionate about, is understanding more about that process. But you know, if you're starting to look at kind of forecasting for your own businesses and where you start looking, like Judith said, you've got to keep your like little ears out all the time. So it's understanding what's happening in the wider social context, what's in the news, what's in blogs, podcasts. Carolina loves a podcast.
I am.
All of those aspects are going to be kind of filtering through. But also, you know, dig deep. If there's an area that you're interested in, dig deep and do research. And again, this is, you know, these are kind of very simple steps that we've all learnt how to do.
So for me, I'd have to agree it's research. So I'm creative director of Colour Forward, which is then our trend forecasting tool, but I'm also past president of Colour Marketing Group, so I do trends for both. I have a team in Singapore, I have a team in Chicago, Sao Paulo, and then my team in Milan in Italy. And we just scout for the whole year. We scout exhibitions, we go to conferences, we go to technology conferences, we go to Republica, for example, in Berlin. We'll go to innovative speakers, and then obviously we do use our very own innovation, working obviously for colors that go into thermoplastic materials, so synthetic materials. We are big on sustainability, and then obviously technology behind. So we work a lot in the world of additives. So how can we enhance this color? Can we give it a different touch, a different tactility? Can we enhance this color and the story behind the color with transparency or opacity levels, or different type of structures, organic pigments, and all of that actually goes into the bigger picture. But one thing that is key, if you don't do your research and you don't go to multiple cities, multiple places, multiple exhibitions, and you don't go to multiple speakers, you can't really do the forecasting, because you need to have a very wide view. You need a lot of information that then you'll digest within your workshop or however you tend to work, because you need as much as you can on a topic. Do your research well, and then you'll get your stories right by making them relevant for your customer. But the research is key. If you don't do the research, you can't do trend forecasting.
Yes, I think it's very, very important, and you learn to think outside of the box, because we tend to be drawn into the stories that are more relevant for us, or they're much better with our personalities. But when it comes into trend forecasting, you look into things in different levels that perhaps are not that interesting to you. For you, for example, Judith, what do you feel at the moment is the area into the research that you have been putting together for 2020 and 2021 that you feel is more key to look up? And if the audience have to kind of pay attention to one specific sector or product or innovation material, which one you think is the best one for them to keep an eye?
Okay, so I'm going to start presenting 21 soon, but I'm working on 2022. I think one of the things that I mentioned before is neuroaesthetics. So designing intelligently, as I said before, so understanding also emotional reactions that people have, if you have the capability of measuring them. I think one of the beautiful projects was the one that IKEA did with their carpets. So they had this measuring, so they had the EEG measuring headbands, and only if you had a certain reaction, a certain percentage to one of the designs, you would be able to actually purchase the carpet. If your score was too low, you were not allowed to purchase that carpet because you were apparently not feeling it. It wasn't your carpet, it wasn't your design. So they also avoided then that people after bought these beautifully designed carpets and they throw them on eBay for, amazing prices. So they actually also avoided that happening, but they also understood this was more push, neuroaesthetics push. So, but I think for the next edition, they've got a lot of information on what actually people enjoy and what people enjoy individually. So how they could probably be designing the next carpets for the year after to come. So I think neuroaesthetics is key for 2021 for sure. And tactility, as I said before. I think we're living in a screen-based society. Everything is slick, gloss, lucid, feels cold. Most of you are actually writing. I'm very surprised. But most of you are still holding an iPad or an iPhone. And that's our reality. That's the reality we're living in. And I think we'll start to see, especially in accessories, but also in home interiors, soft, raw, anything that just enhances your senses, but especially when it comes to touch, definitely. Biolighting, biorhythmic lighting,
Justine is very interested in biodesign. It's something that for you have been interested for the past years, and we are talking more and more in public about how to affect color. What do you think for the audience in here? It will be interesting to know more about biodesign, or which area for you at the moment is what you are looking?
I think for the biodesign, it may not necessarily be the processes or the materials, but it's the feeling behind it and the way that people are thinking more globally, the way people are understanding the impact of their actions, of them taking responsibility for them. And if you're a retailer or a designer, this is something that you're going to come across in terms of what people are going to buy off you. They're going to want to know that all the process from the design itself, the components, the packaging, the way you're presenting it, your visual merchandising, that all of that has been carefully thought through, and that you have a purpose and you're bringing circularity into the design. I think circularity for 2020 is a big thing for this kind of market.
Very interesting. When it comes to talk to trends, me as a person and having lead different trend forecasting companies, one of the questions that is always on the mind of any client is validation. How you prove that these trends are right. What do you think about that, Judith?
So I've been in trend forecasting since, well, let's say at least the last 8 years. I've been in colour since 2007. I do a new trend forecasting every year for my company, and then I'll do several ones for Colour Marketing Group. But the interesting thing is that most of my customers will say, what about last year's? Did you get it right? You know, what was your accuracy rate? So for years, and I think many don't do this, they don't research whether they've actually had a good accuracy rate. So we've been doing that now for the last 3 years. So we've been researching our past 14 editions. We have an accuracy rate around 85%. It's actually 95 over the 2019 version. And how we do that, so we go, we look up 5 markets. We don't do all the markets that we're working in. So we'll look into fashion, product design, graphics, packaging, and automotive. Because those are the main markets I work with. And then we'll check if a color has come up on multiple products. So 5 times, so I do 20 colors per year. According to the 4 stories that I've got, if that color has come in all those 5 markets over 5 times, because this is our own accuracy rate that we've had to implement because nobody else is doing it, that would be for us a confirmation. And that's just color, that's not the trend stories. But generally that's a little bit how we validate, and we've actually made a video about that too. So I'll show that first. So I'll show the confirmation video of 2019. And then I'll start with my, actually 2020 now, and then I'll start with 2021 before I do that. So first I'll show the validation of the previous edition, and then I'll go into the next.
Yeah, so it's always a process of trend tracking. But perhaps the second question that I think many people have asked me over the years is how you can translate these drivers and information into a color palette. Are the colors the representation of this year, and how you come into these conclusions?
Well, again, it's kind of like doing it in reverse to start off with. So we're very much, especially with interior product design trends, that is, as Judith said, we're very much driven by kind of societal changes. And there's been quite a bit of research into that kind of shows these like big shifts. If you think about something, say, like the early 90s, for example, when we were coming out of a big, like, 1980s crash, if you think, like, in your mind's eye, like, the types of colours that we were surrounding ourselves with these kind of stones, beiges, neutrals. 90s was, like, very bland, very neutral. And then you kind of take that position, and then you look at, like, 2007, 2008 crash. So I did like a little research to have a look at how colour was being presented, because don't forget, you can find any colour you want at any time, but when we're talking about trends, we're talking about, you know, the tendency towards colour and the way that it's being put out there. And looking at all the exhibitions across fashion and interiors, pre-crash, you can see this vibrancy of colour, this liveliness. We were kind of on a crest. We weren't expecting what was coming. And then you see all the exact same shows, the same designers, but the following year, post-crash, and you see all of those colours, the chromacity, the vibrancy of it has been taken out of it, and it's just all been taken down a notch. And this is our, it ties in with colour psychology, colour science, colour ergonomics, and this kind of like shows a reflection, as we said earlier on, of either what's happening around us, so we're kind of, you know, showcasing it to get us through it, or it's like a physical way that we counteract that, so we counteract what's happening around us with the colour. So we can see that there are elements through history where people have chosen certain colours certain types of colours at certain times. And so what we can do then with the colour forecasting is start to bring that into the colours that we understand the consumers are going to be looking for tomorrow.
Would you like to add something else more to this, Judith?
No, it's just generally in forecasting, I think you've all now understood that it's not like us going like this, see where the wind blows and just pick out our blues and our oranges. If, for example, blue was big for 2020, I think everybody tends to agree on that one. Blue's not going to disappear in 2021. Indeed, the shade may change according to, indeed, feelings, psychology, what's happening in the world. Colours never just appear and then completely disappear from one season to another. They flow. And that's, I think, how, even though some may not agree, that colour forecasting is not that different from just mathematics. It is, impartially, it is science. And it's reading the right signs to know where colours are moving. And I think that's how also these type of collaborations that we have really work, because we really mirror each other on our work and where colours are moving in the industries.
Exactly. And also what I see as well is like when you work into trends and you move towards, before I used to do like Judith does now, like I'm doing trends constantly year after year for different forecast purpose. What I noticed that you always ending with a color crash. There is always a color that perhaps if you are a designer, it will bring you the creativity to see that perhaps you never take in consideration. That's where my love for green comes from. You know, I am always have been inclined to other colors, but years ago I find green and I thought like that's the color I like it, and I still be into this color crash with green. But definitely leave the millennium pink side at one point, and I'm sure now you feel the same about colors. What is the color that at the moment you feel you have a color crash?
I've been loving orange for a little while. I'm rediscovering orange. So like a kind of quite bloodied orange, rich. Yeah, no, that's where my personal crush is. I think because like Judith was saying, you know, you get this kind of influx of one colour that, you know, especially in the media, you're having it pumped out at you through the media, like blue is the colour, blah, blah. And then, you know, somebody announces it as their colour of the year, and then all the magazines pick it up and they kind of drown you in it, don't they? And sometimes we kind of like have that just like, you know, I've had overkill of it. So although it doesn't go away, you go to something like, say, orange is the complementary, and, you know, you kind of need that slight relief from it. And you see these colours kind of evolve. So as like one colour family comes up in visibility, another one goes down, and they kind of, it almost like undulates like that, doesn't it? It develops around. We like really bright colours, and then it moves into something a little bit more subtle and subdued. What's your colour crush? What are you looking?
So in my office, I have 40,000 colours, and we've got 8,000 new colours coming in every year from all our labs in Europe. So it's very difficult for me. Although you can't really see it, I tend to dress in not as many colours when I talk about colours, because people tend to get confused when I talk about greens and I'm wearing orange. But I think I'm in my green period still. Yeah, definitely my green.
A green fan. For you, Justine, also the interpretation of colours is also coming from the part of color psychology. What do you think is the role that color psychology plays into trends?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, I didn't start in colour trend. I learned about colour psychology, applied colour psychology first. So then when I came to the trend area, I kind of thought, well, this is a load of nonsense, because it just didn't make sense. But over those kind of early years, I understood that actually colour trends are influenced by colour psychology, and although perhaps it's not verbalised that often, there are basic biological processes that go on in our bodies when we are approached by a certain colour. And so these are reflective of the colour trends. And so I see that it does have that real important role to play in it. And then there's also, that aspect as well of, when we're talking about colour trends, it's understanding what aspects, what colours and what kinds of nuance of colours actually fit within your product. Because there's a lot of play of colour symbolism that comes into it. So people will expect perhaps a certain product to be in a certain colour. If you think about kind of laundry products, for example, there's an association where we expect them to be kind of light and fresh because we want our laundry to be light and fresh. So as a business then you have to understand, well, am I going to play on this kind of piggybacking and take that element of the trend, or am I going to challenge the norm and like go in from that aspect? So there's those sorts of plays that you can do with understanding the colour trend and understanding how it filters into psychology and symbolism.
Very interesting. And now we're going to talk about 2020 and see some trends. We, both of us, me and Justine and Judith separate, have been bringing some trends for you together. Justine is going to presenting a couple of trends that
Yes.
I think maybe they are interesting, or at least give you an idea of what is.
Okay, so we just brought two of our 2020 trends with us. So the first one is called Homme. It's kind of a play on the French for man, and also to be kind of more centred and more considered, more emotionally intelligent. So the driver behind this trend is really the Me Too movement, and what that actually means to the reality of how we see masculinity and how we define masculinity. So whereas perhaps when we were kind of kids, you would see it as masculinity would be all about being the superhero and being kind of badass. But now it's much more about, sharing of parenting, consideration, and it's that kind of courage to be emotionally vulnerable that kind of is the new masculinity. The way that we kind of represent it in colour, so you see that there are like very kind of gender fluid colours in there. So, typically something like purple would not be particularly feminine or masculine, and we've taken the kind of like quite reddish element of it in there. There are neutrals, these kind of like warm grade neutrals, and we've just like developed it into a couple of slides that shows you the types of textures. So you've got these kind of quite complex, deep pile textures with like lots of coloration in there, but they're like soft, but still kind of quite interesting. Interesting in the mix of materials as well. So you take something that's quite traditional, like a basket weave, but when you start to integrate it into something very technical, like an anodized aluminium with that super slick translucency of colour, you get something altogether quite different. And what we wanted to do with these two slides as well was just to show you that when you're presented with a colour palette, to understand that you can take elements of that palette to say something quite different. So this is one half of the palette here, which shows you probably all the warmer tones. And then we look at how you can change up something very different. So you're getting the same influences, these are the same colours, but this takes on, this one was kind of more representing how, we're going into the Olympics 2020 with Tokyo and the blues, and focusing on that aspect and understanding with your materials, value is what you place on the material. It can be a very humble material, but it's the emotional connection that you make with it. The second one that we brought along today, it's a shame the screen kind of gives you kind of quite lurid colours. But this is really about the kind of global crisis. So it's about Deadline 40, which is a group of 40 global mayors working together with Arup to try and understand what they can actually do on a local scale at their cities to try to meet the 2020 Paris Accord. What we're looking at here is this is very much like architectural, but there are still some learnings of it from retail, and how we can work with the functionality of colour. So colour just isn't an aesthetic. We can actually cool our cities with it. We can move people around our cities, make them kind of like nicer environments. So it's that kind of emotional connection with it as well. Obviously the most reflective and the most absorbent colour is white and black, but as human beings, do we want to live in a world that is monochromatic? And so that's where we've started to embrace the kind of blue, the green, to create those areas of like harmony, of light and shadow and depth in our cities. And you kind of see that through some of the interior architecture, and we're looking at how lighting is used and how you can really play on that contrast and make people feel different, to exploit the kind of the light. And again, this one with materials is really important. So looking at how aesthetics change with the repurposing of waste materials. So whereas before it was all very terrazzo based, I think we're kind of starting to move away from that terrazzo aesthetic to something a little bit more considered. If you see the image at the top right in the centre, Charlotte Kiddiger, her project that used the dust from CNC tooling, machining, and she took something that, tons of this stuff, there's nothing that we can do with it. So what she's done is turned it into a material. And as a waste product, it's now a luxury art item. And she's enhanced that with the type of colour that she's using. So she's taken the blue, but then that blue's been influenced by the original material itself. And again, looking at how we could then possibly apply these ideas and these textures to more living organisms that work with the structures of the buildings. So those were the two that we brought with us.
I'm not sure how we are time-wise. I work for Clariant, so Colour Forward is the tool that I work with. So that's my forecasting together with my team. It's got 4 stories. I'm just going to do 2 of them. Care Less is one of the first ones. We also showcased this in Milan Design Week last year. Care Less is about how everything is happening in the world, that we are no longer shocked. So each and every morning we read in the newspaper, for those of you who still read newspapers, or in the news we'll read about shocking events, whether it's obviously what's happening currently in Australia, or what is happening, with Iran, or anything that really shocks us, collapsed buildings. We're starting to see that we're actually getting a little bit of desensitized to shocking events that are happening worldwide. It's a way of protecting ourselves, so it's really a psychological event that's happening. There's too much happening around the world, and we have the need and the feel to protect ourselves very much. So the selective apathy that we're actually feeling is actually something that we need to protect ourselves, because obviously we just become overcome by everything that happens during the day, during the week, and in our lives. So we are still caring, but we are deciding what we're going to be caring for. So things and happenings that touch us personally are things that we decide to care for, but things that are further away, we tend to block them out a little bit more. The signals that we've picked up on this is actually that there are some universities in the United States that started doing happiness classes. Happiness classes, so the psychology of actually the good life, that's what the course is called. It's actually in the 300 years history of that university, it's the most successful course. I think within a few days, it had 3/4 of all students enrolled. They did an online free version. Within 3 days, again, there were 90,000 people enrolled to the online course, because apparently people want to understand how to be happy and how to balance life with everything that is going on. The Riverbend School in India is an amazing example to this too, because that's where the new generation is actually taught about how to live a happy life. So the main focus is on yoga, meditation. Of course, they learn about math and English as well, but the main focus is just about how actually to grow up and be a happier person, because I think what we're seeing with current generations, they're having great difficulties in balance and actually feeling happiness being a weird concept as well. So the colors, so I do colors on materials, not just colors, so it's very hard for me to present these colors on screen. But the light blue, we've called it squirrel, for example, so it's from the movie Up. When the dog, when they scream squirrel to the dog freezes, because this is what actually happens to us when something bad happens. Something bad happens, we obviously, in the beginning, we feel very shocked, but very slowly that shock is actually gone. And what happens is that we feel that we don't care about the event, whether it's a terrorist event or an accident, a bad accident happening. We start to feel guilty. And when we actually start to feel guilty about not caring, we tend to freeze into inaction. So that's a little bit how we do color translations from a story. So the story is about apathy, and it's about caring less. So those colors then, so we picked an ice blue. This actually has a frost effect when you will look at the color. I'll just pick up as well as the cacti color. So that's the light green that you're seeing over there. So that's the color of the cactus. Cacti, what they do, they live in harsh environments like we all do. With the needles, they actually keep everything that's dangerous and unwanted at a healthy distance. The yellow, we call it unshockable. It's a neon yellow because we don't tend to be shocked anymore. So that's a little bit how we also give names to the colors, which is an important process, because my consumers tend to recall more the name than actually the color itself. The second story is I Am Watched. I Am Watched is very much about the society that we're currently living in and how we're always rating one another, whether it's on the Uber. So you rate, of course, your Uber driver, but you're rated as well. Not sure if you've ever seen Black Mirror's Nosedive. It's already an old edition, in which obviously you're rated throughout your interactions throughout the day. So good, positive interactions give you a higher rating. Bad interactions give you a lower rating. At a certain point, you're not allowed on trains anymore. You're not allowed to buy apartments in beautiful neighborhoods. We all thought that was fantasy, but that's actually happening as of this year in China with the social credit system. So in China, your each and every move is validated. You're being watched and you're giving a number. And that number, that rating, is indicating how trustworthy you are as a person. Now, you all think this is just China. It's not just China. There are systems like this in the UK. If you want to buy a house, rent a house, get a mortgage, or just get a loan, you have to provide your credit score. In countries like Germany, even if you've been living in a bad neighborhood or your neighbors have a bad rating, that influences how much money you will be able to loan from your bank. So we all think this is just something that's, top down from the government. In other countries, very, very far away, but it's happening in our today's societies as well. So this is really about how your rating is going to influence your trustworthiness, but also your access to services, for example. So some of the colors here are clean. We've made them transparent because this is about living in a transparent society. But some of them are also a little bit dirty. When I say dirty, it means that the color has a hint of black inside, because there's a bit of confusion. There's a lot of different opinions about whether we like a system like this or not. Generally in Europe, people don't tend to like a system like this, but whether we like it or not, unfortunately, it is something that's already, in our daily lives. So those are the two trends that I did for 2020. So yes, you are being watched.
Thank you. Very interesting concepts. We don't have much time because we are running out of time, but if you want to bear with us for just like the last few minutes, perhaps Justine and Judith want to go quickly through our thoughts for 2021. We have like a minute, so maybe a few words in what do you think?
Okay, so this is kind of like a little précis of one of our thoughts for 2021. And it's really around the aspect of purpose, and purpose being the kind of new luxury. And so we look for things that have a reason to them, and it's not really just about kind of self-love, but it's about that kindness around. So I was telling Caroline that I was reading yesterday about ecological grief, and that's something that would really sit very well within this trend. That we, as Judith was saying, there are like so many bad things happening around us. This one is focused more on the ecological aspect of it. But then what do we do to kind of move us forward from it? So it's about like looking at kind of creating open and honest partnerships, for example, where you're kind of transparent about working together for like the greater good. I'll kind of like rush it along a little bit, but looking at before it's kind of been dog eat dog kind of aspect of it, but it's opening up more questions about like kindness and people looking for good news. It's this kind of antithesis of being attacked and bombarded by so much negativity all the time, and you see that people are actually starting to make a difference. They care, they're working in the background to get these things done. I pulled out just like a couple of key colours that I thought would be most impactful for you guys as like retail and design. So for example, the orange, I kind of mentioned, this is kind of a colour crush, and the orange has been kind of starting to emerge back up again over probably like the last like year or so. You've seen it kind of going through this spiced terracotta, but it's cleaning up and it's like moving into a bit more vibrancy. So especially within like small product areas, like this is kind of one to watch. The other one that we've got to watch is the yellow, but again almost pushed. I'd not seen yours before we like did these, but pushed to almost like a fluoro aspect. So really on the edges of like luminosity. So again, for you guys with like the smaller products, those aspects would be like the way that it sits within a more neutral palette. And then the blue, like we've shown it as a gradient because it's a colour that like has movement, reflectancy, and like this soft sheen. So those were like a couple of like ideas from us about this kind of universality.
And for you, Judith?
Thank you. So my 2021 first trend story is called Dum Num, yes, like the American lollipops. And it's about the dumbification of society. So this is the screen-based society that we're living in. The tactility that I talked to you about before, but also research that are now actually showing that especially increased screen time with younger kids, especially toddlers, especially when they go beyond 7 hours of screen time, yes, 7 hours of screen time, actually has great influences on their learning difficulties. It actually also, changes their forward cortex. So there's a lot of research going on there now. There is even a research that actually shows that while you're having your phone just in your pocket, just close by, it actually makes you stupid in that very second. So it's really about how human engagement is becoming a luxury, because this is really about the big divide. So the big divide used to be about technology. So you had a lot of lower income families that were not, dipped into the internet, into technology. They maybe didn't have television at the beginning, or maybe they had one iPad in the whole family, one computer. And now we've got like 3-4 computers. 10-year-olds have iPhones. They often have an iPad as well. And we have got televisions in almost every room that we are actually residing in. The opposite is happening. With the elite, the new status symbol is going off the grid, is having no screens. There's nannies in the Silicon Valley that actually in their contracts, when they're watching, those big tech directors' kids, is that the kids, they have a amount of screen time that they are allowed to watch screens, but all the rest of the time they actually have to spend time with them. And that's how we're starting to see that human engagement, so human contact, is actually a new status symbol, and it's not for everybody. Unfortunately, it's something that is just for the few lucky of us. And that's about the very big digital divide that we're going to talk about in 2021. So the colors, as you can see, I don't name all my 40,000 colors. I don't all give them a name, but stupidify, emotional forecasting, trend forecasting and color forecasting often is obviously subjective. So stupidify is a color that we felt was very Barbie-like. It felt a little bit stupid to us, so that's why it's a tactile color, so it's a morbid color. The golden ticket, you can't see it, but it's a beautiful pearlescent color. It has a shimmer, so it's really about the luxury of human engagement, but just for the elite. Ciao che fai, which in Italian slang, that's the orange. See, the orange is popping back up. Mine is a bit more on the redder side. But that's really about, the screen society that especially teenagers are living in, and their way of communicating, not having human contact. No Wi-Fi is a very light off-the-grid green, which is all about these off-the-grid luxury holidays, very expensive and unfortunately not available for everybody. And then that one is actually a marble effect, and it's called Wi-Fi. We have enormous fun naming some of the colors. But those are the 5 colors that are of my Dum Dum story for 2021.
Thank you very much. We don't have much time. As you see, we can talk about color all day long. If you have any questions, perhaps it's better if maybe you can grab us when we finish, and maybe in one of the corners. We'll be very happy to talk with anybody that would like to talk to us. I think next talk, Harry, will be on...
So we're back here at 2 o'clock. We'll be asking the question, is experiential design the future? So you've got 30 minutes if you wanted to come back and join us for that. Go and grab a coffee. We hope to see some of you again then. And thank you, of course, to our speakers in this session who did an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.